Hi, and welcome back to the Contemporary Old West with B.F. Biles. If you enjoy Westerns, I hope you'll hit the subscribe and notification icons. I truly appreciate your support. If you'd like to share this video on Facebook, I'd love that too. Anything you might do, greatly appreciated. If you're enjoying the story and you're interested in a copy of my novel, Hunting Charm, you can check out my Amazon page or email me directly. I'll have a link in the comments below. Again, any support is deeply appreciated. In today's episode, you'll hear part 2 of the second half of chapter 9 of my novel, Hunting Charm. If you haven't listened to the previous chapters, I recommend you do so. I have the first 8 chapters in a playlist. It's probably best you start with chapter 1. Today's plate of history beans, I'll continue talking about Indian Territory and cattle drives, but this time I'll take a little departure into Hollywood and Howard Hawks' classic Red River, starring John Wayne. The movie has faded some with time, but thanks to deft direction and a solid script, it gives some pertinent insights into what it may have been like to drive 1,000 or 2,000 cattle 800 miles through Indian Territory in the mid to late 19th century. So, without further abuse or ado, here's part 2 of chapter 9 of Hunting Charm, Nakona and Sam. In part 1 of chapter 9, Brant and Matt have arrived in Comanche territory. Matt decides he would like to talk with the Comanches that spoke with the Baylor brothers when they were searching for Doreen in Oklahoma. At their campsite, Brant goes out hunting, then falls asleep upon the side of a small creek. He has just awoken. Chapter 9.2, Hunting Charm, Nakona and Sam. Returning to camp, he noted that a pair of elderly native men had arrived. The pair rested on a fallen log and gestured for Brant to join. Strangely, thinking Matt must be nearby, Brant felt unconcerned. The younger of the pair, a man of perhaps 50 with a roundish face and spindly legs, stood and introduced himself as Sam. The older man, a proud-looking warrior with a square jaw and pronounced Roman nose, remained seated regarding Brant with a steady gaze. As Brant settled on the embankment alongside the visitors, Sam pulled a nearly empty whiskey bottle from his knapsack and offered it to Brant, who had a sip. A moment later, Matt appeared and eased down next to Brant. The bottle was offered again, and Matt also took a sip, wincing at the taste. "Smooth," he said, eliciting smiles all around. The calmness of the afternoon, Matt's casual demeanor, the faint rustling of the breeze through the cottonwood boughs, it all seemed like something from a dream. And even though Brant couldn't remember much of his dream from earlier, he vaguely recalled something about a puma. The more elderly of the two visitors, the proud, intelligent-looking old warrior, nodded and held up a circular charm attached to a leather thong around his neck. Then, oddly, the old man winked at Brant. "This is Peter." Sam pointed to the old warrior. "He don't talk no English, except maybe to say hello. You got more whiskey?" "Well, now that depends," Matt said, breaking the spell. "We're looking for a man named Quanah Parker. You know of him?" Sam translated for the older man, who smiled. "We know him. We saw him just yesterday. This is Quanah's father." The translator pointed again at Peter. The old guy winked a second time. Brant began to wonder if the old warrior had a tick. "I need to ask Quanah some questions. Do you think Peter would introduce me to his son?" "Like I said, Peter don't talk much English, but he's plenty smart." Sam said something to the older man in the Comanche tongue, and they both chuckled. "So, you know where I can find him? Quanah, I mean?" You got more whiskey?" Sam and Peter both smiled broadly. "Well, sir," Matt nodded. "Let me just take a look-see." Matt always carried 3 or 4 bottles for bartering. He had hidden the bottles carefully this time, concerned that Matt might relapse. As the handsome cowboy walked toward the mules to fetch a bottle from his pack, Brant followed. "When did they get here?" Brant asked. "I thought they came in with you," Matt said. "I went up the hill, and when I came back, the 3 of you were sitting here." "I thought you knew they were here." Brant glanced nervously over his shoulder. "They don't look dangerous." Matt rooted around in his pack and a moment later found a sealed bottle of Irish whiskey. "Let's not keep our guests waiting," he said. "How about this here?" Matt said, displaying the bottle as they approached the 2 older warriors. They spent the next few minutes passing the whiskey around. It became clear that Sam regarded Peter as someone deserving respect. Brant and Matt both assumed the old warrior must be a chieftain of some sort. Matt, the master of any social situation, began telling an old joke. "There's this here Seminole hunter, brave and with many trophies." Matt gestured broadly, imitating a hunter drawing a bow. "He is given the task of teaching a young member of his tribe to hunt." Matt's voice grew low, suspenseful, gesturing and pausing to allow Sam time to translate. "They ride from the village and travel to their favored hunting grounds. The brave hunter says to his young students, 'Climb into the tree there, and if you see something, shoot it.' The teacher then disappears into the brush." "I think I heard this one already." Sam sipped from the bottle. "You ain't heard it told near as good as I'm going to tell it," Matt said, continuing. "The young tribesman, just a boy, climbs into the highest tree, scanning the area, eyes like an eagle searching for prey." "Yep, I heard this already." "Do you want to tell it?" Matt said. "No, you're telling it good." "Okay, well, I'll keep it short since you've heard it. Anyway, the sun crossed the afternoon sky. The heavens glowed red." Matt's voice grew hushed. "The young hunter, still vigilant, saw a movement below. Remembering the words of the experienced hunter, he drew his bow and fired. In the growing darkness, you could hear the animal fall. At the same time, he heard the voice of the experienced hunter call out, 'Get down here, you fool, you shot me!' Matt's visitors chuckled at the line, but Matt shushed them. 'Hang on, that ain't the end.' So the young hunter climbs down as quick as a bobcat. He can see he's nearly killed the experienced hunter, but his teacher is still breathing. Maybe I didn't hear this one. So the young hunter helps the experienced hunter onto his horse, and they ride for the home of a wise and respected healer. If anyone can save the life of the experienced hunter, it will be him." "So the experienced hunter still lives?" "Just barely." Matt winked. "This ain't the same joke I heard." They ride through the night and arrive early the next morning. The healer applies many medicines, but sadly, the experienced hunter dies. Maybe this is the same joke I heard after all." "Well, why the hell don't you go on and tell the end then?" Sam nodded and announced the punchline with a broad gesture. "The medicine man says he might have lived if you hadn't gutted and cleaned him before you brought him in." Sam grinned and repeated the punchline to the older man in his own language. The older Indian, puzzled by the story, didn't laugh, but instead said a few words, eliciting a chuckle from Sam. "Nokona says the joke makes no sense. He says that the experienced hunter would have died immediately after the young man gutted him." "Well, I reckon he's right. But you can tell Peter that a joke ain't gotta make sense. It's just gotta make you laugh." The translator spoke for a long moment to the older man who, chuckled and nodded. Brent, having heard the joke a dozen times or more, didn't laugh, but did smile at Peter's remark. He had already decided the two elderly native warriors posed no threat. Still, he wondered if they might be dangerous under different circumstances. "Brantley, did you hear Sam say how they saw you napping over yonder earlier, but decided you didn't look like you wanted your scalp taken?" Matt made a couple of sweeping motions across his hairline and pointed at Brent, drawing appreciative grins and nods from both men. Brent had heard the comment but had ignored it. "He's lucky they didn't try it," Brent said. "He's just joking," Matt said. "I need to get a few things done before nightfall." Brent stood and Peter winked at him a third time, an action that baffled Brent. He knew, this time, the wink was more than just an optical tick. Was the old native warrior signaling him somehow? He nodded at Peter, feeling awkward, then turned and left Matt alone with the old men. The two old warriors spent a few minutes conversing with Matt, then stood to leave. As they exchanged handshakes, Matt gave them a few small things, the remaining whiskey, a twist of tobacco, and a sewing kit in a small leather sack branded with the Ulysses mercantile insignia. Matt knew that such gift exchanges were common protocol when meeting native tribesmen on the trail. A bit of cultural awareness he hoped the two elder warriors would appreciate. "Before we go," Sam said, "Peter wishes to speak to your partner." "Okay." Matt looked in Brent's direction. "Hunter, can you come over here just for a sec?" Brent, who had been digging a small drainage trench around his tent, walked back over, wiping dirt from his hands. Peter didn't wink a fourth time, but Brent could see the man scrutinizing him. Even though the old warrior didn't intimidate him physically, something in the man's gaze caught Brent's attention. Peter then placed a hand on Brent's shoulder. The proud old warrior spoke for a long moment, his eyes never leaving Brent's. "Nakona says you will meet him soon and receive a special gift." Sam's voice had a serious tone. "Peter says his time is near, and when you meet, he will guide you to your spirit animal." Sam said nothing more, and a moment later the two older men disappeared onto a game trail leading into the brush growing alongside the creek. "That last was a little odd," Matt said. "What did he say about a gift?" "You got me." Brent recalled something from his dream from earlier. There had been a mountain lion and a line of Indian teepees alongside a stream. How had he forgotten that? These native folks have strange ways. Brent didn't reply, but looked in the direction of the two men's departure. He wondered if his dream was connected to the old warrior. "Yeah, pretty strange," he said. As night fell, the conversation turned to something Matt had mentioned earlier. "So you figure there's a chance this Tarwater gal ain't dead?" Brent asked. "I think it's likely. Those Baylor brothers had all kinds of little inconsistencies in their stories. Did I mention that Bart told me they never saw Doreen's body, and Bucky said they did see the body? Bart was half delirious from having his arm cut off, but that isn't a detail you forget." "Let's say she's alive," Brent said. "Or we learn she's dead, but Johnson didn't kill her. What stops Theo Tarwater from refusing to pay us?" "He paid me $200 in gold already for expenses, so there's that. Our contract says that if we bring Johnson in, Tarwater will pay us, even if the courts find the colored feller didn't do the killing." "We're talking about a colored man here. Like as not, there won't even be a trial. I don't care to be party to a lynching, Matt." "Well, we're going to need to take that when it comes." Do you think Tarwater's the kind to hang a colored man without a trial? Some folks would just as soon kill a black man as look at him." Matt nodded but couldn't think of a satisfactory reply. He had already been thinking about Cecil Johnson and the possibility the man might be innocent. He also knew that breaching a contract with a man as rich and powerful as Theo Tarwater might lead to problems for them down the road. In today's Plate of History Beans, I'll talk briefly about the 1948 movie Red River, directed by Howard Hawks. In last week's Plate of Beans, we talked about the Chisholm Trail, the most important of the cattle trails that was only used for a few years. In that episode, I pointed out that cattle trails have given us a lot of Old Western lore. There have been numerous movies and television shows that revolve around cattle drives. You might say that brief period of time has as much to do with how we see the Old West as any other element that I can think of. In Red River, starring John Wayne and Montgomery Clift, a cattle rancher in an unspecified area of South Texas has a problem. He has thousands of cattle, but they aren't worth anything in Texas, maybe $3 or $4 a head. So, with his adopted son played by Clift and a crusty old friend driving the chuck wagon, Walter Brennan, they start north with a herd of over 1,500 head of cattle. The story of Red River first appeared in the Saturday Evening Post as a part of a 6-part series about the Chisholm Trail written by author Borden Chase. Chase, primarily a screenwriter, wrote several movies, including The Fighting Seabees, also starring John Wayne, Winchester 73 with James Stewart, Bend of the River with Stewart and a rising young star, Rock Hudson, His Majesty O'Keefe with Burt Lancaster, Man Without a Star with Kirk Douglas, and dozens of other scripts for film and television. Red River was directed by Howard Hawks, one of the best directors of that period. Hawks worked as a director for over 50 years, from 1916 until 1970. His films include such classics as the original Scarface, starring Paul Mooney, His Girl Friday, To Have and Have Not, The Big Sleep, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and perhaps my favorite Western movie, a film director Quentin Tarantino calls his go-to for get-togethers, Rio Bravo. On the set of Red River, things were tense from the beginning. Stars John Wayne and Montgomery Clift had political differences. While director Hawks tried to impose a no politics rule on set, he wasn't entirely successful. It didn't help that Walter Brennan, one of the most famous character actors who worked almost exclusively in the Western genre, didn't like Clift either. It's said that Montgomery Clift turned down the role of Dude, a part played by Dean Martin, in the movie Rio Bravo because of his differences with John Wayne and Brennan. Red River was made in black and white, even though Technicolor was widely used by 1948. Hawks said the gaudy colors associated with Technicolor didn't fit the gritty realism of his concept. It's hard to say if Hawks was right or not. I will say, to my eye, the film looks amazing. I should also add, however, that at the time of its release, Red River wasn't immediately successful at the box office. Since that time, however, the film has become a classic and appears on dozens of greatest movies made lists. Red River is still pretty good to watch, though there are some elements that don't play well to modern sensibilities. For example, after the original cuts of Red River were made, Hawks wasn't satisfied, So we added several B-roll sequences with narration by Walter Brennan, pulling material directly from author Borden Chase's original story as the script. Those look cool, with gigantic herds of cattle streaming endlessly across the prairie or crossing rivers, but the narration seems a little lame, to my ear anyway. For me, the best parts of Red River are the sprawling scenes that feature the roughly 1,500 bovine extras Hawks insisted upon using. Red River is a departure for Howard Hawks, who, up until that time, had directed more intimate films made in Hollywood studios, like To Have or Have Not, or The Big Sleep. Instead of the safe studio environment, Hawks took his show on the road and made a sprawling film that looks amazing. You can watch the completely remastered version of this film for free, by the way. Just crank up your streaming device, search for it on YouTube, and let it rip. I'll put a link below, along with a couple of others, if you want to dig a little deeper. If you're looking for a Western, however, Red River is one of the best. That's it for today's chapter from Hunting Charm and my plate of history beans about the movie Red River. I hope you'll take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button. It only takes a second, and I would truly appreciate your support. I'll be back next week with another chapter from Hunting Charm and another plate of history beans. For now, this has been the Contemporary Old West with B.F. Biles.